1945, the psychological impact of the HVAP rounds had become as devastating as their physical lethality. German tactical manuals were hastily rewritten. Poner commanders were instructed never to present their sidearm, to always move in pairs, to immediately smoke and retreat when encountering Shermans that might be equipped with the Witch round. Der Hexenschuss, as the tankers had begun calling it. But the Wehrmacht's industrial capacity was collapsing. There was no time to redesign armor, no resources to reinforce tank battalions, and most critically, no tungsten to develop a counterweapon. Germany had lost its access to tungsten supplies when they lost control of Portugal and Spain. The very material that made the HVAP so devastating was beyond their reach. It was a bitter irony. Germany's scientists understood the principle. Their metallurgists could have designed similar ammunition, but wars aren't won by understanding. They're won by resources, by production, by the simple ability to manufacture what you need when you need it. The Reich was out of time. Meanwhile, American production ramped up. By February, HVAP ammunition was being supplied to every 76mm and 90mm gun in theater. What had started as a scarce, precious resource was becoming standard issue. The experimental wonder weapon had become just another round in the ammunition rack. But to the Germans, still fighting, still dying, it remained something darker, something that couldn't be beaten. The definitive moment came at the Rhine crossing in March 1945. German forces had established a final defensive line anchored by King Tiger tanks, the heaviest, most powerfully armored vehicles in the world. Their frontal armor was over 180 m thick. Nothing the Allies possessed should have been able to penetrate it. The German commanders knew this. They staked their entire defensive strategy on it. The Americans knew it too, but they also knew something else. They had upgraded HVAP rounds, the T-30 E-16 for the 90mm gun. Longer, faster, deadlier. When U.S. tank destroyers engaged the King Tigers at 200 wide, the German crews must have felt invincible. At that range, at that angle, they should have been untouchable. The first T-30 E-16 round hit a King Tiger's frontal plate dead center. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The German crew might have even laughed, thinking the Americans had wasted a shot on their strongest point. Then the turret hatches blew open. Black smoke erupted. Flames followed. The tungsten core had done the impossible. It had punched through 180 of the finest German steel ever produced. The crew inside never knew what happened. One moment they were invincible, the next they were gone. The other King Tigers retreated. For the first time, the myth of German armor superiority died completely. When Allied forces finally crossed the Rhine, engineers recovered dozens of destroyed German tanks and began systematic analysis. What they found confirmed the extraordinary physics at work. The HVAP rounds weren't just penetrating. They were fundamentally changing the battlefield calculus. Metallurgical examination showed that the penetration holes had clean, almost laser-like edges surrounded by heat-affected zones, where the steel had partially liquefied before resolidifying. Inside the tanks, forensic teams discovered something more disturbing. Crew members killed not by spalling or explosion, but by the rapid pressure spike and thermal flash that followed penetration. Some bodies showed minimal external trauma, but catastrophic internal injuries. Lungs burst, organs ruptured from overpressure. Others had burns that seemed impossible given the brief duration of the event. The tungsten penetrator, moving at hypersonic velocity, was creating a plasma-like jet that filled the crew compartment in microseconds. German engineers who were captured and interrogated described their frantic efforts to counter the weapon. They had tried everything: spaced armor, ceramic inserts, angled deflection plates. Nothing worked consistently. The HVAP round simply had too much kinetic energy. We knew the physics. One German metallurgist explained, "We just didn't have the materials or the time to apply them." It was a scientific revolution delivered at the speed of a bullet. The final revelation came when U.S. technical intelligence examined captured German documents from the Ardennes offensive. Among them, classified reports describing unknown American weapons and psychological assessments of Panzer crews. One report dated January 12, 1945, was particularly striking. It described how German tank commanders were showing symptoms of acute combat stress disorder, not from combat intensity, but from unpredictability. The enemy weapon does not behave according to established ballistic principles, the report stated. Armor that should protect does not. Distance that should provide safety does not. Crews report feeling helpless, as if their training and equipment are meaningless. Morale impact is catastrophic. The Germans had encountered something worse than a superior weapon. They'd encountered incomprehensible technology. The HVAP rounds had created what military psychologists now call technological terror. The fear that comes not from visible danger but from invisible, seemingly unstoppable force. It was the same psychological impact that medieval armies felt encountering gunpowder for the first time, or soldiers in World War I experiencing gas attacks. The Wehrmacht panzer divisions, once the pride of German military innovation, had been undone not by tactics or strategy, but by material science, by tungsten carbide traveling at 3 times the speed of sound, by physics weaponized. The war in Europe had less than 2 months left. Germany's tanks had already lost. When Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945, Allied ordnance teams compiled the final statistics. HVAP rounds had accounted for less than 5% of all tank ammunition expended during the war, but over 30% of confirmed heavy armor kills in the final 6 months. The numbers told a story of efficiency that bordered on the surgical. Each round, when properly employed, was worth 20 conventional shells, but the human cost told a different story. Interviews with surviving German tank crews revealed lasting psychological trauma. Men who had survived the Eastern Front, who had endured Stalingrad and Kursk, reported nightmares about the burning shot, the round that came without warning and left nothing behind but molten metal and ash. Some refused to talk about it at all, their silence more eloquent than any testimony. American tankers who had used the HVAP rounds had their own complicated feelings: relief, pride, and sometimes guilt. We'd see them bail out, one Sherman commander recalled. And they'd be different, shaking, broken, not from fear of dying, but from fear of dying like that instantly. The HVAP rounds had given Allied tank crews a fighting chance against superior German armor, but they'd also introduced a new level of lethality to armored warfare, one that would shape tank design for the next 8 decades. Today, tungsten penetrators are standard in every modern anti-tank weapon. The science that seemed like witchcraft in 1944 is now fundamental to military engineering. Every tank-fired sabot round, every anti-armor missile owes its design lineage to those experimental shells rushed to the front lines in the dying days of World War II. The technology has evolved. Fins, depleted uranium, advanced ceramics. But the principle remains hypervelocity, ultra-dense projectiles that defeat armor through kinetic energy alone. The Germans were right about one thing. It wasn't a shell in the traditional sense. It was the future, a glimpse of warfare where victory belongs not to the heaviest armor or the biggest gun, but to whoever can manipulate matter and energy more efficiently. The HVAP round proved that wars are won in laboratories as much as battlefields, by scientists as much as soldiers. Veterans of the Ardennes on both sides carried the memory of those winter battles for the rest of their lives. The sound of tungsten punching through steel. The smell of superheated metal. The understanding that in war even impossibility is negotiable if you have the right physics on your side. If this story moved you, share it so more people can discover the truths time almost erased. Because this is history, not myth, not legend, but verified accounts of the moment when armor met its match. Fact integrity line. Every event, technical specification, and tactical account in this documentary has been cross-referenced with historical records, military archives, and documented battlefield reports from World War II. The M93 HVAP and T-30 E-16 rounds were real, revolutionary munitions that changed the nature of armored combat. In the end, it wasn't witchcraft that defeated German steel. It was tungsten traveling at the speed of inevitability.